Buddy, put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at MichaelDukesShow.com and across the state of Alaska on Vision, favorite radio station and or FM translator. Hello, my friends, and good morning. Welcome to the program. It is beautiful Tuesday. It was Monday, but now it's Tuesday. It's, it's that 3-day weekend thing. It gets us every time. I love it. I love it. I love it. We are ready to go and diving into it here this morning with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. It will be the first post-session recap of the weekly top three, and we are ready to dive into it and get ready to go. So I don't know as we need to do any further ado here. So let's do it. Oh, Chris Story going to be joining us in hour 2 this morning. So we'll be talking with Chris Story, of course, and we'll be doing that here in hour 2 of the show today. But before we jump into anything else, let's go ahead and get down to it and get started with Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, who joins us right now. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Michael, I'm doing great today. How was your Memorial Day?
It was educational. It was educational. Let's just put it that way. Educational. It was fun. We had a lot of good stuff go on. Lost my water for 2 days, but other than that, it was almost like it was a dribble. It was dribble for 2 days. But now we're back at it and ready to go. And I don't know. How about yourself? How was life treating you?
It was good. I kept thinking yesterday was Sunday. I was in my Sunday mindset. Wasn't worried about the show, and then all of a sudden it dawned on me I need to get my topics ready for the show today. So
need to get all ready. Yeah, no, it's one of those things where there was one day in there where I didn't think about it at all, and then it was like, oh my gosh, we're gonna get going. It's that's how it rolls. All right, well let's get ready to rock and roll here and start talking about the weekly top three. So the session is over, and we're in the interim now. And your first topic is, of course, going to be about the PFD, because I fully expect that this will probably be the last year that we see really any kind of, maybe next year we may see a $500 PFD, but it's going to be a tough one. And you tell us why. We got a big chunk of the budget being paid for this year with the PFD. Well,
this is sort of my typical post-mortem, post-session look at what the budget was. And I go back to Finance 101, sources and uses of cash, or sources and uses of revenue, and try to chart that out. And and I did that for the budget that the legislature passed last year. And to me, even to me, who had sort of seen this coming along the way, it was sort of eye-opening. Do you have that first chart that we can pop up? Or
I do, right here.
So this chart looks at the sources and uses for the budget. The budget was $5.44 billion. The sources, the revenues, are on the left-hand side. The spending is on the right-hand side. The uses of the revenue is on the right-hand side. And the thing that pops out to me is the red on the left-hand side. The red, the revenues, the sources of funds on the left-hand side from the bottom up are oil revenues in the dark blue, taxes and other existing taxes and fees in the green. The portion of the POMV draw percent of market value draw from the permanent fund that is designated by statute for government services in the yellow. And then the red is the portion of revenue that came from PFD cuts, came from withholding and diverting the statutory portion of the PFD to the general fund to support government spending instead. And you can see, hopefully graphically from that the red is about a third. It's 32 some odd percent. It's about a third of the total revenues being used to support this year's budget. I think I'm going to do this for the Friday column to be sure, but I think that's the largest percentage that they've ever used the PFD cuts to support revenues. It is, in fact, the PFD cuts are, in fact, the largest single source of revenue for this year's budget. They are at 1.77 billion, nearly 1.8 billion. They are larger than oil revenues, which are at 1.65 billion. They're larger than the portion of the POMV draw statutorily designated for government services at 1.34 billion. The PFD cuts are the single largest source of revenue that the budget depends on. And for those, I think this also is useful to show for those who say, well, we'll just cut our way. We can just cut spending, cut our way out of this. Well, PFD, to get back to, just using the traditional revenues plus whatever share of the POMV draw is designated for government services, to get back there, you'd have to cut the budget by a third. You'd have to cut the budget down to something in the neighborhood of $3.7 billion. And that's just not going to happen. So I think this chart is useful for a number of reasons, but in particular, I think it's useful to show how deeply the legislature has become dependent on PFD cuts, what I think are personal taxes, PFD cuts to fund government. On the right, for those who are interested and can follow it later, we build up the spending. The agency operations is 4.76 billion. Statewide is 0.45, 450 million. Capital budget is 170 million. And then there's a surplus, so-called surplus in there to really account for the fact that oil prices are going down and the revenues that we're showing on the left-hand side may not add up by the end of the year, may not add up to the level of the revenues projected there. There's a so-called surplus of about $660 million on the spending side. So we did that, and then we looked at how does that translate? How does those PFD cuts translate on an income bracket basis? And the second chart shows the impact of using PFD cuts by income bracket. This is essentially the who pays chart. We know that PFD cuts are paying for a third of the overall budget, providing a third of the overall revenues. Who is paying? Who's taking the impact of using PFD cuts of that third? Who's contributing that third? And the second chart does that, and it shows it by using the IRS brackets, shows it by the low 25, the lower middle 25%, the upper middle 25%, the top 25%, and then the top 10, top 5, top 1, and then non-residents out at the end. And it shows that the bulk of the impact of using PFD cuts by far is hitting middle and lower income Alaska families. All of them are paying in excess of the average rate. We've got a line through this graph that shows what the average impact is on Alaska on adjusted gross income. The average impact is about 5.2%. We're diverting 5.2% through PFD cuts. We're diverting 5.2% of Alaska personal income, what would be Alaska personal income. We're diverting 5.2%, withholding and diverting that over to support government spending. That's the average tax rate, if you will. That those PFD cuts represent. But you can see that distributionally, it falls by far hardest on the lowest 25% of Alaska families, right. Significantly hard on the lower middle still harder than the average on the upper middle. And then when you get to the upper 25%, they're paying significantly less. They're contributing significantly less as a share of income by using PFD cuts by using PFD cuts. So the top 25% overall is just losing 2.1% of their income. Top 10%, 1.4. The top 5%, 0.9%. The top 1% is just contributing of their income 0.4% toward that cost of government. The non-residents, of course, are contributing zero. So you can see that between the two charts, you can see that a huge chunk now of the budget is being financed. The third of the budget's being financed by PFD cuts. And then when you flip over to the second chart, you can see who is paying, who's bearing the burden of using those PFD cuts as a revenue source.
No, I mean, this is a huge chunk. We're talking about almost 30% of the lower 30% of their income, 25%, lower 25% lost out in PFD cuts, 11% of the income of the lower middle class. And it's interesting because there's a new PFD doomsday clock online. I don't know if you saw that. Phil Lizon put it together. Mustard reported on it, and it'll actually do the math for you, how many people were in your house, and it'll tell you how much PFD you've lost in the last, since they started this nonsense. And mine is like $76,000 in our household over the last 7 years or whatever. And it's a huge chunk. And when people realize this is where the money's coming from, and when you start showing this to them, sometimes eyes are open, sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're like, oh, it's just free money, go ahead and do it. I mean, it's madness at this point.
Yeah, but what the second chart shows, what the chart you still got up, is you're showing the subsidies that are going on. So the low 25 are paying the low 25, lower middle, and upper middle quartiles are paying above the average, so that the top 25%, top 10%, top 5%, and top 1% can pay less. The 75% of Alaska families are having more taken out of their income, so that the top 25% and non-residents can have essentially zero taken out of their income. And that's what economists would refer to as a cross subsidy. You have the lower 75%, you have the upper, lower, and low 25% income Alaska families subsidizing the top 25%, subsidizing them by not having as much income taken out of their pockets. And you can see the extent of the subsidy by the difference between what the share of income being taken out through PFD cuts and the share of and the average share of income. So yeah, people say, well, that's just what it is. The people who say that tend to be in the top 25% and non-residents. And you can see why they say that, because the system is benefiting them. They're not contributing the average cost toward the average cost of government. They're contributing much less than the average cost of government, while the remaining 75% of Alaska families are contributing significantly more than the average toward the cost of government.
So what do you think? Where does this take us here in the future, Brad? I mean, now that we've looked at these two things, and especially that second chart with or the first chart with the huge 1/3 number, what does this spell for the coming years in your mind before we go to number two?
Well, it depends. I mean, it depends on oil. I mean, the way they've operated this, PFD cuts are being used as the makeup for oil, the bouncing around in oil prices. And as oil prices go low, PFD cuts are being used to make up for that. The problem is, and we'll discuss this in the third segment, but the problem is when we have a low year like this, and we use huge amount of PFD cuts to subsidize to make up for the fact that oil's coming in low. When we have a high oil year, we don't necessarily reduce the share of the PFD. We just spend more. We use the additional oil revenues to spend more, to what some say make up for past underspending. So I think what this is saying, and when I do the Friday chart, I suspect what I'm going to see is this wedge of PFD cuts as a share of the budget growing over time, and to this point where it's gotten to be the biggest it's been since we started using PFD cuts a decade ago. I think we're going to see just that wedge continuing to grow and sort of staying in place. Once you get to a certain level of revenues being used from PFD cuts, tends to stay in place. And then, the next year, even if we have higher oil revenues, they just spend that additional oil revenues as opposed to reduce the share of PFD cuts.
Yep. Nope. I see it already. All right. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top 3 continues. Post-session edition. We got more coming up. Back with more right after this. Don't go anywhere.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets is our guest. We're ready to go. What? I mean, it's the largest component, that big red bar. It's the largest component of state government right here, and their spending. That's where it comes from, is from you and me. So every time somebody says, oh, we don't pay taxes in this state, just look at that big red bar right there. That'll do it every time. That'll get your attention. What's crazy is that to think that, and I've been reading all the stories this morning, post-session stories and columns about, the schooling and everything else. And I mean, there's an article in the ADN that basically just says, with all the superintendents across Alaska urging Governor Dunleavy to keep school funding boost intact. They've all said it. They're not even being quiet about it. Oh, this is just the beginning. This is just a little bit. This just tides us over till next year where we can come back and beat you down for more. That's where it's going. And I mean, I don't even know what to say at this point, Brad.
Well, Michael, I mean, what we have is the top 20%, top 25% saying it's not affecting us, so let's just keep spending. Let's keep doing more. I mean, you read the editorials or the op-eds in the ADN, you read the op-eds in the Fairbanks News Miner. I know a bunch of the people that are writing those. They're all in the top 20%. It's not affecting them. There's no break on their desire to spend, because they don't have to pay a portion of it. It's all being shoved down to middle and lower income Alaska families. So maybe the break kicks in once the PFD is gone and we have some sort of revenue regime that takes a portion of their income also to pay for it. But until then, it's free. It is free money to them. I mean, they're being subsidized heavily by taking the money out of middle and lower income Alaska families instead. There's one thing that really, surprises me, given, we do have a fairly decent level of press, media, political reporters in this state. The Alaska Beacon had a headline this week that says CBO analysis, talking about the federal budget. CBO analysis shows U.S. House GOP budget measure tilted toward upper income taxpayers. And that article is a detailed analysis of the Congressional Budget Office analysis of what the House GOP bill would do. And it is the House GOP bill would result in reducing the tax burden of upper income families a lot more than the tax burden of middle and lower income Alaska families. I'm not going to argue what's going on at the federal level. The point is, we don't have anything near an article like that about what's going on in Alaska. We don't have an article that looks at who's paying for this third of the budget coming from PFD cuts. We have a lot of articles about, who's paying the oil taxes and the impact of increased oil taxes on the oil companies. We don't have any articles. It's a third of the budget. We don't have any articles focusing on what using that revenue source, how that revenue source affects Alaska families in the same way as the CBO analysis. We don't have any articles that analyzes that, nor do we have any articles that talk about what impact using PFD cuts is having on the long-term economy of the state. Yet we have article after article, op-ed after op-ed about the impact of oil taxes on the state. That's a lower revenue source in this budget. That's a lower revenue source than PFD cuts. The ignorance of Alaskans, in part resulting from the failure of the media to follow through on these stories in the same way they do at the federal level. The ignorance of Alaskans on these issues, I think, is part of the problem, and part of the problem, and a bigger part of the problem is it's just the top 20% willing to spend more and more and more and more because they don't have to pay for it.
Right. No, it's ultimately frustrating. That's for sure. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top 3. We're getting ready to jump back into it. Please like and share, subscribe, ring the bell, do all that kind of stuff. Let's get more folks involved in this conversation. I mean, because obviously the news media is not going to do it. They're not paying attention to it. So here we go. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
Public enema number 1. Oh, wait, sorry. Public enemy number 1, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke show.
All right. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, is our guest, the weekly top 3 post-session edition of the weekly top 3. We got a lot of problems in this state. One of them could be an Anna MacKinnon problem. She's got issues that just keep going on and on and on. Brad, what are you talking about here? What do you say when we've got an Anna MacKinnon? She picks up where she left off. What's going on?
So for those who don't recall, Anna MacKinnon, her previous to her married name, Anna Fairclough, was in the legislature from 2012. She beat Pete Cott. So 2006 to 2018, a portion of the time in the House up till 2012, I think, or maybe 2010, and a portion of the time in the Senate. What's important for this purpose was during her time in the Senate, Anna was co-chair of Senate Finance during the period that Bill Walker began PFD cuts. So she was in the legislature, co-chair of Finance, in the legislature at the time the legislature could have but didn't respond to Walker's PFD cuts. And then she was co-chair of Senate Finance during the time when the legislature, following Walker's PFD cuts, the legislature began its own set of PFD cuts. And that's what's continued on to today. It's no longer the executive making the PFD cuts. It's the legislature making the PFD cuts. And she was a critical part during that period of time when looking back, the precedent was set to start using PFD cuts to subsidize the budget, to help pay, to generate revenues, to pay for government. She was part of the legislature. And at the time, she talked about, we don't want to burden the oil companies for additional taxes. And so we need to have another source of revenue. We don't want to burden, we don't want to have taxes in the state, which translated means we don't want to burden the top 20% and non-residents. We don't want to have taxes, so we're going to use PFD cuts. She was part of that decision-making process. She left the Senate in 2018, frankly, because I think she felt that she couldn't defeat Laura Reinbold, who had announced for her seat in the Senate from Eagle River at the time that she left. She left the legislature in 2018, went on, served in the capacity of the Dunleavy administration as director of the Permanent Fund Division, ironically enough, and has since retired from that. But she's back. She wrote an op-ed that's in the ADN and the Alaska Beacon, and I'm sure we'll go through all the other newspapers in the state with an opinion piece called "A Permanent Fund Endowment for All Alaskans," and it's a humorous title because what that opinion piece endorses is the consolidation of the permanent fund from the 2 account system that we have under the Constitution currently to the single account system that is being promoted by the Permanent Fund Corporation and some in the legislature. As we've talked on the show before, what that really is, what that proposed constitutional amendment really is a way of creating a backdoor into the permanent fund corpus. What's now in the permanent fund corpus is considered off limits to being drawn. What that constitutional amendment does by consolidating the two accounts together is allow the legislature to begin taking the POMV draw, the full POMV draw from the permanent fund corpus in the event the permanent fund isn't generating enough earnings to cover that draw. And it hasn't, as we've talked about, it hasn't in 5 of the last 6 years. So Anna is showing back up at this particular point in time. Now that we've almost drained the entirety of the PFD, now that we're almost, have cut the PFD out entirely, terminated the PFD, drained the PFD, Anna is showing back up at this particular time to endorse the proposal that would open the back door and allow the permanent fund corpus to start being drained into the general fund when needed to be able to support earnings, and with that support spending. The humorous part of this is the title: "A Permanent Fund Endowment for All Alaskans." What this proposal really does is it is a way of continuing to put off the date on which Alaskans would have to pay taxes, which would fall on even a flat tax would fall harder on upper income Alaska families, because they haven't been paying taxes, as we saw in the last chart. They haven't been paying taxes. And what the consolidation of the permanent fund from the 2-account system into the single account and opening the back door into the permanent fund corpus does is put off the date of taxes a fairly long time down the future. So when she's talking about a permanent fund endowment for all Alaskans, what's really going on is the same thing as what happened during her tenure as Senate Finance co-chair in the mid-2000s during this transition period when the door to the permanent fund dividend was opened. What she's really trying to do is continue to protect the oil companies and the top 20% and non-resident industries from having to pay taxes. Because we've drained the permanent fund dividend by then, we will have shortly drained the permanent fund dividend. We drained the SBR long ago. We drained the Constitutional Budget Reserve. Now we're draining the permanent fund dividend. Because we will have drained the permanent fund dividend, the way to continue to protect the oil companies and the top 20% is to open this back door into the permanent fund corpus, and start allowing the permanent fund corpus to be drained. So the segment, the title I sent you for the segment was "Anna MacKinnon picks up from where she left off in the Senate." Spending, because all this is to support spending, of course, while protecting the top 20% and oil companies from paying. And she did that when she was in the Senate, and now she's resurfacing in time to try to do it again through endorsing the constitutional amendment that would consolidate the two funds into one.
What I found interesting about this piece was that she, at one point, is very clear that she says there's a growing concern with the falling oil prices, the dwindling savings account, and few, if any, revenue options, that the legislature will move to withdraw more than the 5% to meet current needs. And so she says there's a real concern about that. And then she goes on to say, that's why we need to pull the two funds together, because they'll need to draw. And the whole point was to protect the corpus of the fund. I mean, it's dichotomous even inside of her own article. She's saying they're worrying about this, but what we really need to do is combine the funds so they can get access to the main account. I mean, it's ludicrous.
What's going on here, Michael, is they've public opinion poll tested what they think the best arguments, what will resonate the best, separate apart from the merits. What arguments will resonate best with Alaskans? And the polls are coming back saying, look, protecting the permanent fund, limiting the draw to the 5%. those arguments, and another one is, we're going to drain the earnings reserve down, and then we won't have enough money. We need to consolidate the two accounts because we're going to drain the earnings reserve account down, and we won't have enough money to fund government. Those arguments are what they're finding resonate with Alaskans, but they're disconnected from what they're doing. I mean, there are ways to limit the permanent fund draw to 5% if that's what you're concerned about. You can have a constitutional amendment that says we will limit the permanent fund draw to 5%. We will still have the two account system, but we will limit the draw to 5%. You could easily do that, but that's not what they're doing. What they're doing is just consolidating the two accounts together. And the only reason you consolidate the two accounts together is to open that back door into the corpus. So they are having disconnected arguments, but they're using arguments that they think will play best with Alaskans who won't read the fine print, who won't understand the economics of what's going on. They're using arguments that they think will play best with Alaskans, shouting them out there. This is what we're trying to do, at the same time as they're using those arguments to push a constitutional amendment that does something entirely different. It was sort of like the same way when Anna was co-chair of Senate Finance. Is we needed to cut the permanent fund dividend because we had to maintain spending and oil prices had dropped, and we just had to do this. Well, when oil prices went back up, we didn't restore the permanent fund dividend. We spent even more. And so the arguments that they use at the time are the arguments that they think will sell the best with Alaskans, even though what they're doing is something entirely different.
Well, the problem is the inevitable destination is still the same. The inevitable destination of taking all of the permanent fund dividend and eventually starting to draw into the corpus and eating the seed corn, it all reaches the same spot one way or the other. And that's the point that nobody seems to be taking in, is that that we have a spending problem in this state, and until we find a way to curb the spending problem and find alternate revenues to pay for it, this is what we're going to continue to get. Yeah,
it is. I mean, you can see this if you just sort of step back and look at the history of Alaska, the fiscal history of Alaska since 2010. It's been spend, spend, spend. Where do the revenues come from? Well, first we'll drain the SBR, the statutory budget reserve. Then we'll drain the CBR, the constitutional budget reserve. Then we'll drain the permanent fund dividend. And now, as we're hitting that end point where the permanent fund dividend looks like it's no longer sufficient to fund government itself, we're going to find a way to open a back door into the corpus and start draining down the corpus, regardless of the earnings being produced by the permanent fund. So it's a continuum. Anna's been there for large parts of it. I mean, she was either the House Finance co-chair or the Senate Finance co-chair during the entire period that the SBR and CBR were being drained down. She was the Senate Finance co-chair when they opened the door into the permanent fund dividend and started draining it down. And now she's coming back for an encore to write this op-ed endorsing the next step in this process of opening the corpus to be able to start draining it to support spending.
Which again, I mean, it all leads us to the same place, which is total fiscal destruction at this point. I mean, there's no two ways about it. All right, Brad, give us a tease for number 3 here.
Number 3 is we're going to talk a little bit about oil prices and the claim by some that Alaska's, the tail on the dog of OPEC, and we're just being wagged around. I'm going to talk about how we could change that, but we haven't, and why we haven't.
All right, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top 3 continues. We continue in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top 3. Hello, my friends. How are you doing? You ready to go? Let's get things kicked down here. Let me see. There was a couple comments that I wanted to take. Brad's comments last hour about the fact that there's not any good reporting in the state. Kim says, you're right, Brad. They're not news reporters, only left-leaning political analysts. That's how many times have you seen that? Have you seen them rewrite a press release, essentially? Drop a press release into Chat GPT and come out with a news story with no alternate side, with no analytic. I mean, this piece from the ADN and Sean McGuire starts off with after it talks about the superintendents urging Dunleavy to keep the school funding, and it says after almost a decade of flat state funding, lawmakers on Tuesday voted to override Dunleavy's veto. After a decade, there has not been flat funding. The BSA has remained relatively flat, but the way that it's written makes it sound like they've had no extra funding at all for a decade. It's I mean, there is no accuracy in what's being written out there, Brad.
Yeah, and it's not consistently left, Michael. I mean, the article that the Beacon published, rushed to publish on the CBO analysis. CBO analysis shows U.S. House support GOP measure tilted toward upper income Alaska taxpayers. That some would consider would be a left leaning article, and you could if you were left leaning in Alaska, you could see an article that said, Alaska. Analysis shows Alaska budget measure tilted toward upper income taxpayers, but they don't do that. So it's not even consistently left. It's consistently nothing. I mean, it's not an analysis of what's going on in Alaska at the fiscal level, at the individual level. It's just silence without the type of analysis that we're seeing themselves publish from a national level. So it's not consistently left or right. It's just consistently sort of nothing.
It's just lazy is what it is. It's lazy reporting. I mean, we're not really seeing the deeper analysis of any of those things. And of course, it's the same players, like you said. I mean, the highlight of bringing Anna MacKinnon back after she was a huge part of the problem. But again, she was there right in the teens when they were emptying out that whole, when they emptied out the CBR of $15-16 billion. She was right there along with them. Like, we can be responsible. I mean, we only spent all this money, but trust us, we can be responsible with this money. Yes, we need access to the corpus of the fund because we can be. And Randy is saying, "Oh, I want the two funds to be combined as well. I want the consolidation of the corpus and the." How is that going to help them, Randy? They can't control their spending now, so you're going to give them access to a bigger pot of money because that's what's going to. Well, I just want to put off an income tax. It's coming. That's the thing. It's inevitable at this point. Nobody seems to really want to address that, but at the rate of spending that we have right now, it's coming. Am I wrong, Brad?
No, but it may not be an income tax. It may be a sales tax because that tilts heavily.
Income tax. Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Right. That's regressive, and so it continues to protect the top 20% and the oil companies. It may be something other than a sales tax. But Michael, what they're trying to do is they're trying to put off even that, and the effect is going to be for future generations. It's just making it worse. It's just piling it more and more and more and more on future generations by first draining the SBR, then draining the CBR, which the CBR is intended to be, multi-generational. It's intended to be sort of this emergency fund that each generation gets when it hits the hard spots in the road. What this generation is just drained it out, and they're not restoring it for future generations. So they just drained it out. So this generation is, passing on to the future generations an empty bank account when those future generations hit their hard spots in the road. Permanent fund dividends, taking it from middle and lower income Alaska families. And the CBR will just pass it on to future generations. Just buck the problem down the road to future generations. So it's a giant grab. When you look at the last 10 years, the last 15 years of Alaska fiscal history, it's just a giant grab for all the benefits of spending, all the benefits of bigger government, without fiscal responsibility at the higher end of the income bracket or at the oil companies.
We're going to get ours now. We don't care what happens down the road because we'll be gone, essentially.
Yep.
I mean, they're taking away. I mean, when they chip away at the corpus of the permanent fund, and that means diminishing returns every year, eventually there will be more taxes because somebody's going to have to pay for all that spending, right? And it'll be you and me, the people who are still left. We'll be the ones paying for all that spending when it comes down, because they wanted to make sure that they got theirs now. That's what it's about. All right, we got to get back into it. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show, proudly splitting the left versus right dichotomy. Yeah, I had to look that word up too. I don't think it means what he thinks it means. Here he is, though. That guy, Michael Dukes, the one with the show.
Okay, tail wagging and OPEC. OPEC has been the dog. We've been the tail. It's been wagged, but Brad says that can be fixed. Just bob the tail. That'll fix. I mean, no, let's not do that. Brad, what's your solution here?
All right, so we're seeing a bunch of articles now that where people are saying Lyman is one of them. They're saying, oh, oil did this to us, OPEC did this to us, or the Trump tariffs did this to us. Whoever they want to pick on to be the cause. It's not our fault. It's not the legislature's fault. We're just responding to what's going on out there in the world in terms of oil prices. I wrote an article. This is not a new argument. It's an argument that comes up every once in a while. I wrote an article a long time ago during the early days of the Alaska landmine column that I'm doing that talked about how we could take control from OPEC, how we could take control of our destiny, and the same issue pops up from time to time. Here's the deal: what oil does is, and we all know this, oil goes up, oil goes down, oil goes up, oil goes down. What we do is we follow the roller coaster. Oil goes up, revenues go up, spending goes up. Oil goes down, oil revenues go down, and what we're seeing this year, PFD cuts go up to make up for oil going down. We don't bring spending down as much as we just start grabbing, the SBR or the CBR or PFD cuts, or in the future the corpus. Oil goes down, we grab revenues. Oil goes back up. Well, we've got all these revenues that we created from drawing from the CBR, SBR, and permanent fund dividend. We're going to keep those. Oil goes back up. We're going to increase spending to make up for the lower spending that we had when oil was down. And then oil goes back down, and all of a sudden we're in a crisis again, like we are this year. And we have to take deeper and deeper PFD cuts, the revenue du jour, the alternative revenue that they can grab now. What we do with other things is, for example, the PFD, the statutory calculation of the PFD. Earnings go up, earnings go down, earnings go up, earnings go down. We take the average, the 5-year average, in calculating the PFD. We don't chase after earnings as they're going up and down. We take the 5-year average. POMV, the percent of market value draw. We do the same thing. The market value, the percent of market value goes up, goes down, goes up, goes down, depending upon where the landing spot of the permanent fund at any given year is. But we take the 5-year average of the POMV value, or the market value of the permanent fund, in calculating the POMV draw. Take the 5-year average of that. Oil, we just follow the roller coaster every year. We don't even follow the roller coaster. We follow where we think the roller coaster is going. We don't even say, the roller coaster went up this year, we're going to spend more. The roller coaster went down this year, we're going to spend less, or we're going to draw more revenue. What we say is, we think the roller coaster is going up, so we're going to spend more, or we think the roller coaster is going to go down, and so we're going to draw more from from the PFD. We're basing our spending on where we think the oil revenues are going, or basing our revenue draws from other sources based upon where we think the oil revenues are going. We could easily and so we're at this extreme end of the tail with the OPEC dog. I mean, OPEC breathes one way, oil prices go down, and all of a sudden, we're being bounced around here at the end of the tail. We could take control of our own destiny with respect to oil prices if we did the same thing we already do with the PFD and the POMV. If we used the historical average of what oil prices were and only spent that. And in one of the articles that I did on this, one of the op-ed pieces I did on this, I did the calculations and said, look, if we take the average, if we have a year that goes high, we take the excess revenues above the average and we put them in an oil revenue stabilization fund, or we put them in some as part of the CBR, or we put them somewhere and say, look, we're going to bank these against periods when oil is going to go down, because we know oil is going to go down. When oil goes down, then we have, if we've used the average, then we have funds from a prior period when oil was up, and we use those funds to fill the hole. Not only does that stabilize revenues across a period of time, it stabilizes spending across a period of time, across the future. Because what we've seen is when oil prices have gone up, we've spent like crazy. We've started new programs. We've started new, capital expenditures. We've started new things. And then when oil prices inevitably go down, we don't stop the spending on those. We don't try to control the spending on those. We want to continue spending on those because we've now created constituencies for that spending. And so we have to go grab revenues from someplace else to make up the oil hole, the hole that's being created by oil prices going back down. And the ones that we've been grabbing, the revenue source that we've been grabbing since 2017 is PFD cuts, doing it through PFD cuts, filling that gap through PFD cuts. If we had revenue stabilization by having an average take across the calculations I've done show a 10-year span with some sideboards on it would work best. But if we had revenue stabilization across a span, we would have spending stabilization, better spending stabilization, because we wouldn't have the periodic splurges in revenues, in oil revenues, that have allowed us to create these new programs that then create constituencies that we then have to fund in future years when oil prices are down. It's aggravating when I see people try to blame the problem that we're having in the state this year with oil prices. It's aggravating when I see people blame that on OPEC, or blame it on Trump's tariffs, or blame it on something else. It's aggravating because we could control this ourselves. We could be just like we've done with the PFD and the POMV. We could control this ourselves, but we've chosen not to do it.
Well, because it would require fiscal discipline, because it would require, in the years of plenty, like you said, the years of plenty when we should be taking that excess and banking it in some way, whether in a CBR or some kind of new petroleum, whatever it is, they would then have to withhold that spending and hold on to it. And they've shown that they don't have that kind of discipline. I've been advocating for this for years, that the budgetary process should be based on a 5-year rolling average of what the revenue has been historically, not plucking a number out of the sky because the projectors at the Department of Revenue say, oh, oil's probably going to be this. 8, 10, 12 months from now, oil's probably going to be this. Let's build a budget based on the maybe, the if come. Instead, what you've received the last 5 years, take an average of it and set that as your spending level. And if you get more, bank it. If you don't, then you'd have to pull some money from some. But again, it would require fiscal discipline, Brad, which is the whole problem we're dealing with.
Yeah, Michael, I sometimes when I think through this issue, I come to the conclusion that yes, we have a spending problem, but the spending problem is being driven by the failure of revenue management, prudent revenue management. And we really have a revenue management problem, because what's happened is through this lack of revenue management discipline. What's happened is we've allowed these spike peaks to occur in projected oil prices. Keep in mind, this is all projected oil prices. We've allowed these spike peaks to occur in projected oil prices and rushed in with, and by using that as the revenue, rushed in with a bunch of spending because we have all this money, we might as well spend it. All these people have, pent up demand from the years that oil prices were low. If we had adequate revenue management tools, if we use the 5 or the 10-year averaging for oil prices, the same as we use the averaging for the PFD and the POMV, our other two big financial issues. If we use the same sort of averaging tool with respect to oil, we would see revenue stability across that period. And that would lead, in my opinion, to spending stability, because we would be able to say, look, we don't have the revenue to support that spending. But by going down this road of riding the roller coaster, where we think the roller coaster is going down this road of riding the roller coaster, we're hitting these spikes when we create this additional spending. And then we have all these people wailing about, well, we created this program, and now I've got all these people dependent on this program and expecting this program. How can we cut this program back now that we've created it? We've created this cycle where we've allowed the roller coaster of oil to set the high spending, and that failure is a spending failure, but that revenue is being driven by a failure of revenue management.
Yeah, no, and I agree. If we had a base that said we know we're going to take this 5-year rolling average, there wouldn't be that pie in the sky of, oh man, they're rubbing their hands together. Look at all the money we're going to make this next year because our revenues are going to be up. And so they start planning. Now it would be more of a stable baseline. I agree. But again, you've got to take that first step, Brad. And the first step is the addicts don't want to put the crack pipe down, right? They don't want to do that. They don't want to be forced into a corner and have to spend within the means or have less money available. And that's part of the problem. Again, it leads back to the lack of discipline to be able to do that kind of stuff. They want to be the heroes to say, I delivered the program to you. But you're right. I think it must happen.
Well, and Michael, we need to understand this is not a Republican Democrat thing. I mean, we had 2 very solid years of oil revenues in 2022 and 2023, fiscal year 2022 and 2023. If I'm reading this chart I've got way over here, if I'm reading that correctly, it was either 21, 22 or 22, 23. We had 2 very solid years of. Yep.
Hold on a second. I'm sorry. I'm up against it. I got to go. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense, Liberty Based, Free Thinking Radio. I'm sorry, Brad. I wanted to give you a chance there, but man, I hit it. I looked up and I was ranting, and I realized I had ranted for 30 seconds that I didn't give you the chance there. So finish your thought. We were in high years, 22, 23.
Yeah. So it's not just Democrats. It's not just Democrats that are leading us down this road. We were in high revenue years, in years in which Republicans were in control of the budget. And the Republicans, we have been in high revenue years and years in which Republicans are in control of the budget. And Republicans have continued this process also. So it's not just, you can't look at this and say, oh, it's the Democrats, we can just get the Democrats out. It's not. It is the institution that we've set up of riding this roller coaster, where we think the roller coaster is going, riding this roller coaster from year to year.
Yeah, no, it's not. We've said it here on the program. This is not a left or a right, a Democrat versus a Republican. This is a big government versus small government problem. And we've got a ton of Republicans. They're the ones you can lay most of this crisis at the feet of Republicans, because they refused to acknowledge that they had a spending problem back in the teens when they spent $15 billion out of the savings account because they didn't want to reduce the size and scope of government to match what the revenues were. Not realizing that it was, they didn't even think the fact that it was a short-term solution to draw $3 billion, $4 billion a year out of the CBR. That's not going to help. That's not a long-term solution. And it doesn't matter because most of the people who were there in the teens are gone now. Although they'll write op-ed saying what we need now is something even, is something even better. I mean, I was there. Hey, I was there when we were spending money like drunken sailors, but it'll be fine. Don't worry about it. Open up the corpus. It'll be great. I mean, this is all part and parcel of the problem. I agree with you. This is why, I mean, the Charter of Changes, number 4 was change the funding mechanism for government. And I was specifically saying, changing the budgeting process to having a 5-year rolling average. We use it everywhere else because of the volatility of the petro state. Why aren't we using it there?
Yeah. It's it is as critical. I think it's as critical a piece of an overall fiscal fix as any other piece. It is lowering expectations. I mean, what we've done is we've set spending expectations at the peaks of these oil cycles, because we've spent that money, we've treated it as revenue, treated all of it in the year which it occurs as revenue, and so we've spent it and we've set up new programs, and so we've set the expectation of spending at the peaks of all these oil cycles. And the reality is we certainly don't always hit these peaks, and so we're faced with a situation where we're going through these cycles, and now that we've set the expectations, we have to find additional revenue sources. I think looking at this as as much as a revenue management problem, as a spending problem, controlling the amount of revenues that we use in the budgeting cycle by being much more realistic about oil prices, being much more long-term oriented about oil prices as opposed to chasing the roller coaster. I think having a much better revenue management system is as important to controlling spending as anything else. And this all comes back up to my mind because we have these people, we have legislators who are saying, "Oh, it's not my problem. The fact we have to do PFD cuts this year, not my problem because oil prices went down. It's OPEC's problem, or it's the Trump tariffs problem." It's not. It's your problem from not having set up a revenue management system with respect to oil that takes into account oil goes up and oil goes down. That's right. Your fault. That's not OPEC's fault, and it's not Trump tariffs' fault. It's your fault for not having set up a controlled, disciplined revenue management system.
Tawny says, what about a 5-year rolling average? How about with the 5-year rolling average at a 2-year budget cycle so that there's a baseline for the 2-year legislative cycle? I mean, I'm not opposed to that. Some states do that. Why not? But I mean, it would be a huge leap forward to just go with a 5-year rolling average.
5 years would be better than where we are. 10 years would be better than 5 years. I mean, what you find is these oil cycles tend to go on for a period of time. So a 10-year average on oil prices tends to get you get you closer to the median point in the sine curve than a 5-year. So, but 5 years better than where we are. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, because right now we're pie in the sky. Let's pluck a number out of this. What does it sound like? I mean, that was the Sean Parnell. Oil is going to be $115 a barrel. I don't care that it's $78 right now. It's going to be $115 a barrel, and I'm going to write a budget based on that. I mean, it's madness. It is madness. And again, this all comes back to the fiscal discipline of a legislature, which heretofore has not shown really any fiscal discipline at all.
But it's fiscal discipline. I guess my point on this is it's fiscal discipline on the revenue side as well as on the spending side. It's fiscal discipline. It's fiscal discipline to say, yes, the revenues that were projected for next year may be X, but we're only going to use Y because we know that oil goes up and oil goes down, and we're going to set our revenues at a realistic long-term level as opposed to following the roller coaster up and down. Our problems are being driven by not doing that as much as they're being driven by spending it all when we have it. We shouldn't be doing that either, but we should be defining our revenues in a way like we do with POMV revenues, like we do with PFD revenues. We should be defining them in a way that is much more disciplined.
No, and like you said, it would hold that back. Now, how do we get that instituted? That's my question. How do we get that instituted? It's a strong governor. We're out of time, Brad. Go ahead quickly.
The governor could do it. The governor could do it in the budget cycle. in saying this is the amount of revenues I'm using in my budget cycle. Doesn't take the legislature. The governor could do it.
Well, we'll see where that goes. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top 3. Thank you, my friend. Appreciate you coming on board.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
Folks, we're out of time. Hour 2 is dead ahead. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. Here we go.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Hello, my friends. Hello. Are you ready to get groovy with it? We're gonna get groovy with it. That's what it's gonna be. We're gonna get ready to go and do our whole thing here on the program. Just finished up with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top 3. And if you missed it, it was some good stuff. It was some good stuff with Brad, and we look forward to visiting with him last year. I want to take the last topic first for what Brad was discussing there, because that's what we've been talking about here on the program for so long. We've been talking about the Charter of Changes, right? And the Charter of Changes are the 4 things that I think would help to bring Alaska back on track. And we've talked about these ad nauseum over the last few years. Number 1 is to change the players, and that's changing changing out legislators. Changing out legislators. Now, we've done a bunch of that. We've changed upwards of 60% of the legislature in the last 6 years, something like that. 60%. And yet the part of the problem with changing the players, and we've discovered this as we go through this stuff, we've discovered that there's some flaws in my Charter of Changes. Changing the players, yes, changing out the players can help, but if you still have the business as usual crowd in key positions in the legislature, and I'm talking about people who have taken, finance and some of the other positions where, leadership positions, speakers and rules committee chair, et cetera. And they are staying in there with all these new players. They just kind of corrupt the, one little speck of yeast, kind of grows the whole thing, right? So we've changed the players, but that still doesn't solve it on its own. The second change was to change the venue. And what I meant by that was we need to move the legislative sessions onto the road system, not move the Capitol. I'm not talking about moving the Capitol. We've fought that battle how many times in this state? No, I mean, just changing so that the actual legislative session itself could be held on the road system where people could drive up to it and participate more in their governance. And that's happened. That's happened before. So there is precedent for it. We've had sessions on the road system. We need to change the rules, and that's more about the binding caucus rule and the Open Meetings Act and the conflict of interest rules. Those would be rules that I think that would go a long way to fixing some of our problems. But the final one is to change the funding. And by changing the funding, what I meant was the way the budgeting process is being done. And that is, again, part of our problem. is that we are, it's like taking a wag, a wild ass guess at what we're going to be getting for revenue next year. That's what we seem to be doing around this state all the time, over and over and over again. It's a guesstimate, right? That's what they're doing when they put these budgets together. And we see it this year. We started off factoring a budget at 70, whatever it was, $73 a barrel for oil. And all of a sudden, oil's in the mid 60s, maybe going to the lower 60s or the upper 50s. And it's a crisis. It's an absolute crisis that, we just couldn't see that coming. That's because you've based it on your best guess. And historically, the spring revenue forecast, the fall revenue, those forecasts have never been right. Sometimes they're close, but a lot of times they're not. Why would you build a budget based on the best case scenario? Right? If you're in a business and you're building a budget, you have to look at historically, what have you done in the past? I know because I built budgets for businesses, right? What did we do in the past? What do we expect to come up? What is the fudge factor and the wiggle room? Where can we cut and make efficiencies? I mean, these are all the things. We don't just pluck the number out that we think is going to happen and then base the whole budget based around that. We look at historicals. Why would we not look at historicals when it comes to the revenue forecast or the budgets for the state of Alaska? Why doesn't the governor go, we need to look at, I liked what Bernadette Wilson said the other day when she said, well, we need to do zero-based budgeting. I think that's great. I would love to see zero-based budgeting, but I think having a 5 or 10-year snapshot of what the revenue has been historically would also help us inform where that zero-based budgeting needs to end up. I really do. Because that would at least give us, we would know that we can't shoot for the stars when we can't even get over the barn. Because that's what's happened time and time and time again. Oh, oil's going to be here. It's going to be $100 a barrel. Oh, what do you mean oil's only $68 a barrel? Oh, that's going to go, And as Brad said, every time the oil revenues would shoot up, we just, we would just spend it like crazy. It was the Natasha von Imhoff comment after we just spent 2 years of brutal legislative sessions going over the budget and trying to find out, and then oil prices spiked, and all of a sudden we had, a ton of extra money, and her comment was, well, we've got so much money, we don't know what to spend it on. Why? Why would you? Because that the tough time is still coming. We've based our entire expenditure model on the petrostate thing, which is going to go, as Brad was talking about, goes ups and downs and ups and downs and ups, and we know it's going to be up and down all the time. Why don't we bank that against future times of hardship? But instead, we spend every available dollar. This is why, Randy in the chat room, his comments all the time are, patently ridiculous. I love him to death, but his comments are patently ridiculous because his state is, we'll just give them all the money. They'll figure it out. As long as we balance the budget, that's all that matters. But you're balancing the budget by taking every available dollar that you can find or steal from the people. And that's how you're balancing the budget. And what happens when you run out of OPM, other people's money? What happens when the PFD is essentially gone and you've consumed all of that dollars and now it's in reoccurring costs and you can't go back to it and say, we'll just tap into that some more. It's not going to be there. But the base problem, I agree with Brad, the baseline problem is the expectation that the governor sets by setting his budget. I would rather see a budget based on a rolling average of what the revenue has been, because that will be more realistic than anything else. At least you'd be closer. You'd be closer to what the realistic number is going to be. And like he said, in the times of plenty, when you get more than what the governor's budget calls for, well, we still owe $10 billion to the CBR. We still owe $10 billion to the CBR. It's supposed to have $10 billion balance in there. So why don't we put some of that money back in there? So that in times of true crisis and true struggle, we have the money available to us if we need it. But it's going to take an outside influence to get this done. It's going to take a governor, I think, having to do this because, again, the legislature, they don't, I mean, when we say free rides die hard, that's what we're talking about with them as well. They don't want that gravy train to stop. They want to keep being the heroes. They want to keep delivering the programs to their constituencies and the government money to their constituencies and to their donors and to their patrons and to their elected, to the people who elected them. They want to do that because there's a payoff there. And it doesn't matter if in 10 years it's going to cause a problem because most of them are like, well, I'll be retired in Hawaii anyway, so it won't matter. Or wherever it is. That's part and parcel of the problem here. Since they don't have the fiscal discipline to do it themselves, it's going to take an outside source. It's going to take an outside source like the governor to put this in place, I think. Now, I'm hoping that somebody like Bernadette Wilson or something might be able to get something like that done with a zero-based budget. If you had a 5-year rolling average as the baseline to say this is our maximum cap, and now we're going to zero-base it up to that, that would be perfect. I mean, not perfect, but it would be much better than where we're at today. Because, again, you could see it, folks. This headline right here. Superintendents across Alaska urge Governor Mike Dunleavy to keep school funding boost intact. And the article goes on to talk about how this is just the beginning. They say they got this $184 million included in the BSA. At the same time, they stress that it is not sufficient after years of high inflation and rising costs. This is just the first crack. They said, we feel gratitude to the legislature, but there's going to be more. They're going to be jumping. They're going to be jumping on this one. Matt Sue said they are very grateful. They welcome the funding of HB 57, but they emphasize that it is not enough. The $1,800 BSA is floated around out there as well. Randy Tranny, the superintendent of the Matsus, was careful to emphasize that the funding increase approved this year was not really an increase. When you account for all the costs, we're really going backwards under House Bill 57. So, I mean, the language remains the same. They just move the ball. They just move the ball on the field. Oh, it's not really second down. It's first down. We're going to move the ball over here. We're going backwards under HB 57, he said. And I mean, this is again, year after year after year. And even when we talk about one-time funding, the Sean McGuire, last year districts received $174 million in additional one-time school funding, which administrators said had limited utility due to its temporary nature. Well, I would love some one-time funding that gave me a big boost in a single year. I don't care if it doesn't come back. I mean, it's limited. It's not temporary. It's temporary, but I'll take it. They just continue to go. It's going to be more and more and more. More. M-O-A-R, more. That's what they're looking for. So, yeah, Brad's right. This is going to have to be a top-down thing. And I think that's where it's going to, that's what it's going to take. It's going to be a top-down thing where a governor is going to have to say, here's a 5-year rolling average. We're going to zero base up to that amount, and then we're stopping. Then it's in the legislature's court. Whether they would stick to it, that's a whole different kettle of fish, whether they would stick to it or not. I don't know. We'll have to see. All right, we got to move forward. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We continue with more here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back right after this.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay. Randy said, I said just the opposite. I don't want to give the state more money. No, but you're like, yes, you just said you want to combine the corpus and the earnings reserve. That gives them access to the seed corn to more money. Because unless you put external pressure on them to reduce the size and scope of government, they will continue to spend all available dollars, Randy. I mean, this idea that, giving them access to the corpus is a good idea, and you're just doing it to put off a tax is fundamentally flawed. You're just delaying the inevitable at this point because they're not changing the spending habits. That's the problem. Yeah. How do these people run their own household budgets? That's a good question. That's a great question. Let's see. The governor will redline veto after what happened at the end of the last session we just had, and that may affect the Fairbanks School District quite a bit depending on his line item cuts, says Miguel. Yeah, I mean, that's he may veto it. It's a good question. I don't know if he's going to or not. He may. I don't know what that spells for the state. If he does, I mean, we don't have the money. I mean, we supposedly have a $57 million surplus, but after the $200 million supplemental budget that we had to have this year, what's next year's going to look like? What's the supplemental going to be looking like for this coming fiscal year? We need to reduce the size and scope of government. Carl's got a big comment here about we've not addressed the government spending induced inflation that's destroyed the actual value of the U.S. dollar. I mean, that's a larger issue, but he's not wrong. It appears, David just said, it appears as if the legislature has not sent the budget to the governor yet. Why would that be? I don't know. David. It's a good question. Just going back to see if there's anything else that I missed. Brian asked, how much do you average? I don't know, would we save on per diem costs by moving the legislature onto the road system? I mean, we'd save a few $1 million. It wouldn't be a lot, probably. But there would be some savings because you'd only have to fly the folks from Juneau, and then everybody else could drive to where they are. People from Fairbanks, people from the, down on the peninsula. I mean, Kodiak would have to fly, obviously, or some of these outlying areas, but it would be probably a lot better if, when you've got a 60% of the legislature that could drive to and from home every night. That would be Anchorage and the Matsu. Then it makes it pretty easy. And when you've got a lot more availability of housing for people who live, like, say, on the peninsula or who live from the interior coming down, you could save some money. Yep, you could save some money. But again, a few million there, a few million there. Pretty soon you're talking about real money. All right, let's get Chris on the phone here real quick. I only got 15 seconds here. Hey,
good morning.
Hey, do you want to talk about the book now, or do you want to put it off until later this week?
Yeah, no.
Okay.
It's good.
All right.
You betcha.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
All right. Hold the line. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
All right. Welcome back to the program. It is the Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We're going to change gears just a little bit. We're going to bring on the man, the myth, the legend, Chris Story. He is a realtor. He's a radio show host. He's a potter. No, the other kind of potter. And he comes on board every week to talk with us about, wood ticks, lunatics, and politics. But he also comes on occasionally to talk about his brand spanking new book, because the guy is prolific. He's writing stuff all over the place, and he's got a brand new one out, and we're going to hear all about it right now. Chris Story, our guest, joins us this morning to discuss before we take on the final segment of positivity. So there you go. Hello, my friend.
Good morning, Michael. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here again.
It's always good to have you on the program. So you're a writing fool. I mean, you're writing stuff all the time, but you've got a new book coming out. It's out, right? It just came out. So
yeah.
Tell us about and you write all different kinds of stuff. You write some self-help. You write stuff about real estate. You write fiction, some of my favorite fiction. But what's the latest book? What's the latest and greatest? Give us the rundown here.
In November, when was it? March of 2020, March 28th, I believe it was. I sat down and I wrote a book called The Backyard Millionaire, and it was about these characters named August and Oscar, and I took the readers through kind of sort of my life and times relative to, not graduating high school, working at a hardware store, meeting somebody, give me a book, and that book changed my life. And so while the story is very fictional, the parable is very much also, there's a through line of my life within it. And I miss those characters, August and Oscar, and I wanted to go back and revisit them. Plus, I wanted to codify what I call the millionaire creed. This creed that if you live by it, if you were to subscribe to it, believe it, and go, yeah, I want to adopt that into my life, it would make all the difference. And I thought, well, let's go revisit those guys, see what they're up to, and put the creed inside of a story where Oscar and August are having conversations again.
Okay. All right. So this is more of a novella, a vignette, so to speak, of visits with Oscar and August.
Yeah, exactly. Wrapped around what I've been starting the Backyard Millionaire Show for a few years now with the millionaire creed. It's just sort of wrapped around that. And there's nothing worse in my book, in my opinion, than a parable that is basically just a disguised lesson and cardboard characters put into this lesson. So I tried not to do that. I just tried to make it an interesting set of conversations between the mentor and the mentee around real life things, and how does one go about making decisions? How does one go about negotiating in life and persisting in the face of challenges and obstacles? So it is something that can be consumed inside of 45 minutes. I wanted something that you could sit down and just literally read in one sitting, but it also contains a journal inside of it where you can write your thoughts relative to each of these creeds. As you read it as part of the code, you can go and literally write in the book, in the back of the book, in your own journal, and personalize it for you.
Oh, that's kind of cool. And again, characters that you know and love, characters that you have a connection to. And I think that's important because a lot of times when we identify with a character, we're more likely to take it and internalize the things that they're saying, right? I mean, that's where I think the benefit of this, I think that's the benefit of where kind of revisiting some of these characters comes in.
Yeah, I agree. And I love parables. We are story animals. We remember and retain far more through a story or a parable than we will just a set of facts or figures, or just, something that's dry. If I could real quick, I would love to read the
Sure.
the dedication for this book.
Sure.
I write, for Charles Huff, thank you for handing me a book and a reputation to live up to. I'm in your debt. And that's in reference to who kind of is part of the amalgam of the Backyard Millionaire. Charles Huff came to Homer in 1993 to visit his family and met me working at the hardware store. He was working down at Almer's, and we got to talking. He figured out he had nothing to do. He was here visiting, and so he just, in the old days, hardware stores were a place where you could go talk to people and meet people.
Just gonna say he's on vacation. He goes to a hardware store. Woo, this guy's life of the party, right?
Exactly. But that's where, it's kind of where stuff's happening. And so we got to talking and figured out that I knew his grandchildren and gone to school with his grandchildren. And he asked what I was going to do. Or, his grandchildren were in college. What are you going to be doing? And like, well, and I kind of got around to this idea that, well, I didn't graduate high school. I don't have a diploma. But I've got ideas. And he started talking about real estate, and that was his passion. And I told him that's really what I would like to do. I would like to be an investor. I would like to have portfolio of properties. And I'm sure I didn't use that sentence, but something to that effect. And he came back one day and he handed me a book. And he said, if you'll read this book and absorb it and really take it to heart, it would be equivalent to a 4-year college degree in real estate. And that is the reputation that he gave me to live up to. The book was called The Buy and Hold Real Estate Strategy. And I've got a copy sitting right here next to me. I've got 2 down in my office. I try to find the best first editions I can. I love the book. For over 30 something years now, I've absorbed the book, and it's made all the difference in my life. And so there've been a lot of people, a lot of mentors that I've had that have been generous with not money, but their time and attention and their leadership, to include my father. But I wanted to dedicate this book to Charles because I don't know where I would be. I wouldn't know if I would have had the confidence to do what I went on to do absent that book. And not just the book, but his statement to me that this would be equivalent to a 4-year college degree. And that meant all the world to me. And I don't think he really realized that. He was just a generous person, and he might have given away 20 copies of that book. I have no idea. But it just tickles me to think that somebody somewhere someday might pick up this book and it could make the difference to them. So how dare I not write it? How dare I not put this into the world?
Right. No, I mean, it's important. And that's the points in life where we'll go back and look where somebody lifted us up, even unintentionally, just being who they were, to be able to say, encourage you to go and have it. And I'll be honest, I loved the interaction in the Backyard Millionaire. I love the interaction between August and Oscar because, again, all the self-doubt and the I'm not worth it because I didn't graduate from high school, or I didn't go to college, or I didn't, people deal with that all the time. And the fact that this one guy is like, there are other ways. It doesn't, you don't have to follow the path that everybody else is trodden on. And find people who've actually done the work and listen to what they have to say. And that's why that really resonated with me. That whole component of the mentor-mentee relationship there really kind of resonated with me in The Backyard Millionaire.
Thank you. And in the Millionaire Code, the new book, I think you'll find the same resonance, but also both books have in common. What's the hurry? Why are we in such a hurry? Why are you in a hurry to get some artificial reward or what you think is an end, when really it's the means towards that end is where the good life lives? And in the Millionaire Code, I think, the little subtitle is Unlocking the Principles for Lasting Wealth. In other words, it isn't about how to get rich quick. And I often joke, in my opinion, the best way to get rich is get rich slowly, build wealth over time. And wealth really is a combination of health, wealth, and prosperity, the amount of money you have going forward into the future without necessarily exchanging time for that value. That is wealth. Lasting wealth there's a recipe for it. And it's not a one size fits all. But I hope, anyway, with this newest book, that it's ubiquitous enough in theory that anybody could apply it towards anything they want to do, be it owning 4 or more rental properties, or creating some health in their life, or business, or creating something that's not even been imagined yet, or giving them the confidence to imagine something and then bringing it into fruition.
Can you give us, we got about 3 minutes here. Can you give us a bit of a tease of what Oscar and August talk about? Or can you give us, I don't want you to obviously give it all away, but what is the premise here? What are they discussing?
Well, it ends in a murder-suicide. I'm just kidding. No!
That's the next episode of The Watchmen right here, murder-suicide.
That's right, exactly. That's the other one I'm working on. Well, I'll just read a brief bit in the back. Success isn't a mystery, it's a choice. August is stuck. He's working hard, setting goals, and doing everything right, but he's still falling short. Then his mentor, Oscar, hands him the Millionaire Creed, 7 powerful principles that built Oscar's success and can change August's life forever. Are you ready to take the first step? And it's these 7 principles, starting with promise yourself. And promising yourself, you and I, Michael, we're in sales. We have obligations for our radio programs and an audience waiting at a specific time. We've promised other people lots of things, and we have to meet those obligations like many people. Whether you're a contractor or whatever it is you're doing, you've made promises to others. We're pulling back the curtain here and saying, well, what about you? What promise have you made to yourself that you've maybe neglected or fallen short of? And now is the time to recommit to things that you need to do for you. Promise yourself is much more difficult than it sounds, but ultimately, I think it is the sort of the pathway to actually finding fulfillment when you get to where you want to go, or at least you thought you wanted to go. Absent promises to yourself that you keep, it could be a hollow victory.
I like that. And I'm excited. I started reading it this weekend. I'm narrating it for Chris, and it really is good to revisit and get back to these characters. And it made me want to go back and re-listen to the Backyard Millionaire to begin with, so that I kind of had more context to go in on and come back. I love that. Did your Oscar, did Charles Huff, did you continue to work with him throughout the years, or was it like he touched your life and then was gone? What happened there?
That, yes, but not his son owns the title company that I work with here, and his grandson is now running it. And so the family's been a part of my life throughout my entire real estate career. And I've never forgotten that. But that was the only interaction he and I ever had. I never saw him or spoke to him again. And I did sort of a tribute to him one day. I just felt incredibly moved on a Thursday during the Backyard Millionaire program. I just felt moved to reshare this story in great detail, very deep detail about what he meant to me. And I got choked up even just talking about it. And I come to find out later he had passed away on that day. I had no idea. And he had passed away on that day. And so for me, there's a connection there that Can't explain.
Yeah, no, that's some crazy stuff. All right, Chris Story, the Millionaire Code, which is available now where, Chris?
I love Homer, Alaska. Well, no, go to Amazon. It's not quite on my webpage yet. Amazon, and just type in the Millionaire Code by Chris Story, and it'll pop right up. Ebook or paperback.
And hopefully within the next week or two, it'll be available on Audible as well.
Yes.
Melissa just said, is there an audio version? Don't judge. I contain information better when listening. A lot of us do. A lot of us contain information better when listening. And so, yeah, that should be coming here shortly as well. All right, Chris Story, I love HomerAlaska.com. We're going to take a quick break. And when we return, we'll have more with Chris Story. What's the life lesson today, Chris?
One idea.
One single solitary idea. If you're only going to have one, it better be a good one. We're going to continue with Chris Story, the man from Homer, right after this.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes.
Allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, Chris Story is our guest. That I didn't know that, Chris. That is kind of crazy that you have this impromptu tribute on the day that and that kind of makes it I mean, not that part specifically, but the fact that you really never had any more contact with him, because I didn't know the full story. And after reading the Backyard Millionaire, I thought, oh, you must have stayed in contact with him and you must have bounced ideas off of him and things like that. But just kind of have that one and done. And then that must have been amazingly powerful to have that one interaction change your whole life. And I mean, to not have it be reinforced, I guess.
Very surreal. And his family played that excerpt of my show at his service. And that was just mind blowing. But I think it's important to think about things like that and then put it in the context of your own life. What's a time you've interacted with somebody and you didn't even know the difference you made in their life, but you took a second. Maybe you thought twice, like, who am I? I could say something here. I could do something. They'll figure it out. And you walk away from that, or you've done the opposite and you've made that difference and you don't even really know it. It's like you could have just made all the difference in somebody's life. And so it invigorates me to go on doing these things and it can seem like self-promotion, but at the same time, if I don't talk about this book or I don't talk about this idea or your purpose or power in life, what if one person hears it and it changes their life? Then I think it's all been worthwhile.
Chris, it's the ripple effect, right? His talking to you and spending, visiting with you, twice, right? He meets you, then he comes back and brings you the book and says, go for it, right? His 2 visits with you caused you to change the complete and course and trajectory of your life. Now, Chris is going out, and I'll be honest, folks, if I didn't know Chris Story, I would not be at this radio station here today. If I had not met Chris, if he had not helped me and talked with me and ran ideas and helped put all this, I would not be here today. So Chris's life has now touched my life, and maybe I can help touch other people. It's this ripple effect. His one act of giving a book to a young guy at a hardware store has now, how many more millionaires has that created? How many more people's lives have been bettered and touched because Chris Story took that to heart and kept going and did his thing? My life is definitely better, and hopefully my life, the things that I do, can help other people in the way that. It's just, when you think about that, one pebble dropped in the still pond, how far it can reach, and all the lives that it intersects is amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. 100%. This is so many times that we're in a hurry or whatever, but you just go around an obstacle instead of maybe helping that person. On the other hand, did you hear about that accident on the Seward Highway?
No.
Guy wrecks his motorcycle. Somebody stops to help him, and he jumps in their vehicle and steals it, and then ends up rear-ending somebody going about 100 miles an hour up the highway, and causes one of them to need airlifting. I'm not saying don't be a good Samaritan, but it's a terrible segue.
Wow, I was just
But
like,
yeah, I just heard that.
yeah,
Yeah,
no.
it's an incredible story.
Okay, man. I mean, that was a way to bring us down, Chris. That's that's what a way to bring us down.
Seesaw, Michael. I'd
It's a-
also be have a prescription available that will help you with your new anxiety that I just created.
Every time I drive, I'm like, I hate people. I hate people.
Roll down your window a crack and say, "Are you okay?"
Yeah.
All right.
Are you okay? Doors are locked. Yeah, doors are locked. Windows are cracked. 45 in your lap. Are you okay? No.
Do good anyway.
Yeah,
do good anyway. That's the whole point of it.
All right. Well, I like I said, I can't wait for more folks to get to be, inspired by your work, and I look forward to it. Tell me about I got about a minute here. Well, yeah, he slaps me down. As soon as I bring you up, he slaps you down. That's Chris' story for you. What's the score? What's the score on the Watchmen here? What are we doing here?
Oh, the next Jacob Mann book, you mean?
Yeah, no, I'm ready. I mean, let's
nice.
Making a Man series. Where's the next Jacob Mann book?
Well, it's really interesting because I just told Tiffany yesterday the one I'm writing currently is I told her, and I say this about a lot of things. So this is the best I've ever done. This is like I'm the most intrigued. I think it's Jacob is coming into his own as a person, and it's going to be the best one yet. Promise you that.
It's going to be the best one yet. Are we looking at a 2027 release date, or what are we looking at here? I mean,
No. It'll be by Christmas.
By Christmas. Okay, good. Because I really want to know where Jacob goes from here. I really do. The last book kind of left me hanging a little bit, and I'm like, oh, I really want to know what happens next. So, all right.
It's called The Manifesto.
It's called the Manifesto. All right. Chris Story, the man from Homer. One idea. Here we go. Let's do it.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes. Chris Story, the obnoxiously positive and sometimes hilarious man from Homer, joins us every week to talk about pottery, positivity, and how not to become a nihilist. We're looking at you, Eric. It's the Michael Dukes Show.
Been a while since I played that one. I wanted to play that for Chris. How not to become a nihilist in one easy step. That's Chris' story in a nutshell right there. He comes on every week to give us a little bit of an emotional and psychological uplift, a little bit of positivity. He is the guru of positivity here for South Central, and he brings it to us every week. This week's lesson is going to be on one idea. Somebody just said, who is Eric? Eric is my former producer on the program who was a bit of a nihilist. I will just tell you that right now. He was a bit of a nihilist. But Chris Story cured him of that. Chris, good morning, my friend. Welcome back.
I cured him, so he quit.
He quit. Yeah, he did. He's like, I was a nihilist, and then I learned the Chris Story, and now I can't be your producer anymore. I quit. Okay. All right. Well, that's fine. So Chris, one idea. That's what you want to talk to us about one idea today. What does that mean?
One idea that might make all the difference or none at all. But how do you know? If you don't put some oxygen to the idea, if you don't give it room to live, to breathe, to start to crawl and then maybe walk and then run, or maybe it never does at all. Maybe the idea isn't worthy, but it leads you to another mountain to climb or another concept or an accidental outcome. Just like a 3M, everybody knows the story about Post-it notes. They were trying to make a glue that was so strong it would never release. And in fact, they accidentally made a glue that would release instantly, and they created Post-it notes. You don't know what one idea will do if you don't give it a chance to live. Charles Goodyear, everybody knows that name, Goodyear Tires. He lived through privations, near starvation, 5 children. One of them passed away. They couldn't even afford to do a proper burial. He was just so focused on creating vulcanized rubber and creating his business that his family suffered with him until that idea changed the world. And you don't need a game-changing idea or a world-changing or altering idea, but any idea that you think could be something, but then maybe self-doubt, maybe you don't have the competency yet you need or the skills, hold on to it. Keep nourishing that idea. And one idea could make all the difference if you give it enough daylight, bring it into the real world. I think, Michael, a lot of people are worried about sharing an idea absent the proper patent or copyright protection or whatever. And it's like, you know what? If it's meant to be, it will be and exist. You got to get started and trust somebody at some point. Don't, suffocate your idea for fear of somebody copying it. There's a really good chance that idea is bouncing around in more people's minds than just yours. Are you going to take action?
Yeah. No, I mean, I've fallen into that trap of I've got this great idea, but I don't really want to share it with anybody because I can't execute it right now. Maybe somebody else would hear it and they would have the the finances or the infrastructure to execute it. And if I shared it, I just, and so you sit on it and then you're like, but then you just sit on it, right? You kind of get baked in a squat and you don't really, it kind of just sits there and you don't do anything with it. You gotta get it out and breathe some life into it.
And we live in the golden age of technology that allows the average person, just a regular everyday Joe or Jane, to access some of the most creative tools and computing power that has ever existed on this planet. 3D printers, AI, almost anything exists right now, probably within just a couple of keystrokes away from where you are, to allow you to bring something into fruition into the world and find out, does it make sense? Does it work? Is this resonating with anybody? And I often will remind myself and other people that no one's coming for you. Nobody's coming for you to knock on your door and go, we're the idea police. We hear you have a good idea. Let's get to work on it. You've got to do it yourself. You have to bring other people sometimes into the project as well. And you have to have a certain amount of faith. You don't want to be like my friend John Calhoun used to say, don't count your money over an open sewer. So you may not go and tell the whole world until you've got a little bit of footing underneath you, but trust somebody, bring somebody else in, create a tribe or a team of people around you. And look, not every project's going to be a home run. Not every idea deserves to go on and live. It might be a bad idea, but it might also take you somewhere. But if you don't step up to the plate and swing, you're never going to know. Maybe you could have been a contender, or maybe you would have struck out, or maybe you get hit in the head with a fastball. But at least get out there and get onto the field and try with that one idea.
Well, and okay, so again, let me break it down. Talk to me like I'm 5 here, which is not much of a change. But let's how do I decide which idea is the one idea? I mean, I get all kinds of ideas, right? I mean, I'm like, oh, we could do this or we could do that, or how do I sift the wheat from the chaff, so to speak, on ideas that are good or not, or do I just throw everything against the wall and see what sticks? What's your sage advice here?
I think, and it's not mine, but I'll share it with you. I think this is a great prescription to weed out what you just described, as far as just, so many ideas. And you are a very intellectual person, so that a lot of ideas are coming to you, maybe more than somebody else, but it doesn't matter who you are. Take James Altucher's idea of a notepad. He got a little, those what do you call it? Order, like a little ticket that you would get at a diner. They would write, take an order on and then rip it off. He got one of those pads, and he would write 10 ideas a day and then rip it off and put it somewhere or throw it away. Doesn't matter. Get the 10 ideas a day out of his head. And several of them became multi-million-dollar businesses. And several of them became books. Several of them became lots of things in his life. And this is a guy, James Altucher, who's written many books, to include The Power of No, which is a good one. But many other books, Choose Yourself, and kind of the whole philosophy of doing your own thing, your own way. This is a guy who's gone bankrupt, I think, twice, flown very high and fallen far and then bounced back. One of the ways he had that resiliency was this idea pad. He would take this, this diner little deal and just 10 ideas a day. He would not go to sleep until he'd written his 10th idea, even if it was stupid, a dumb idea. It doesn't matter. Get 10 ideas a day out of your head and begin to build that muscle.
Right.
The idea muscle,
Right.
and the imagination. And then, one of these ideas is going to really land with you. And then if it sticks with you, Stephen King said of writing journals, he said, do not keep a writing journal. If you have an idea for a plot or a book or a character, and it stays with you for months on end, you've got a good idea. You don't need to write it down. I'm somewhere in between all of that. I think if you write these 10 ideas a day down, maybe you come back and revisit in a year, and one of them will be the one idea will make the difference.
Right.
Or it might be, you might end up with 100 bad ideas, but you're building a muscle. It's like going to a mental gym to build the muscle of creating ideas and creating maybe just a new twist on a mousetrap, or you completely create something that's never been thought of before. But that's not necessary to be, to go back to the laboratory and make flubber. It's maybe not necessary, but maybe you could do something else or just change somebody's life with this one idea or your own.
Well, and I think that's interesting because, and again, there's kind of Napoleon Hill talks about the ether, and he talks about, things out in the universe, and how many times have you come up with an idea and thought, well, this is a great idea, and maybe one day I'll do something with it. And then 6 months, a year later, 2 years later, somebody else, markets that same idea. You're like, there are things out there that are floating around out there that you can do. You just got to latch onto it and see if you can make it happen. The one idea, is this the one idea that you want to push forward?
And it has to resonate with you like a tuning fork, because you're going to get resistance. You'll meet resistance. You'll meet obstacles and things that you'll have to overcome, and trip hazards in the way. And people will deride you as an idiot, or you're just a dreamer. What a child. I can't believe you're thinking about this. How do you know when they're right and you're wrong, or vice versa? Because most of the great inventions throughout history have been derided by most people. Look at it, that's insane. You can't make a horseless carriage. You can't, no man, you can't travel faster than 10 miles an hour. The human heart will explode. I mean, whatever, anything throughout history, and it's been derided as foolish. Just, follow through, in your own heart,
Yeah. No, I love it. I love it. All right. Well, Chris Story, appreciate you coming on board. Thank you for your weekly uplift. We need it with all the stuff that's going on today. It's sometimes it's hard to stay positive. So it's good to have folks like you out there saving us. You can hear him today at 1 p.m. on KPEN and KGTL down here on the peninsula. And you can find his podcast at ilovehomeralaska.com, along with all his books and writings and audiobooks and everything else. Chris Story, thank you, my friend. Appreciate you coming on board.
Thank you, Michael. It's been fun.
It's always good to talk with you, sir. All right, folks, we got to go. We're out of time. We will see you tomorrow. Have a great day. All right. No, it's not like Al Gore inventing the internet, Chris. It's not like Al Gore creating the internet. Come on. All right. Well, I think that about does it for us today. I have somebody coming on tomorrow, but I don't remember who it is. See how that is? This is where we're going to get into the doldrums. I have to bring up some good guests here for the next few weeks as we get through it. The week is almost over, says Miguel. Tomorrow's hump day. Yeah, I mean, that's the beauty. That's the beauty of it, right? Shortened week. All right, friends, we'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.
Welcome to the party, pal.